It's not a matter of how fast, how far, or even where we run. Whether we run 1 mile or 100 miles, we are on a journey and embracing where it leads us. This is Running for Distance.
Awesome. Good to see you, man. Actually, a visual this time, right?
Good to see you too. Yeah, man. Yeah, I like it.
I've enhanced the experience because I was like, I started doing these podcasts and I was like, I keep up with my YouTube channel too. And I've started getting quite a following to where people are actually wanting to watch podcasts with the videos. So I was like, well, heck yeah, it just adds a whole dynamic. And I know people like to see what you look like and have that interaction. And I know it's a lot easier to talk when you have someone to look at.
Yeah.
Just staring into thin air. So it's like, all right, this will work. This will work.
It's good, man. And we talked before. I guess we talked when Corona was just getting going, right? I mean, that was last year.
So I was looking back. We talked. Gosh, I want to say it was probably middle to end of May last year, and I released the episode on 4th of July.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, it's been almost a year since we talked, which is crazy.
It is, man. Fast year, dude. So hey, if I get we've got a guy doing our deck in the backyard. So if I move, I'll just move a few places over to the office. Sometimes it's a little darker in there, but I think he's coming in about an hour, so we should be good.
Now we should be good. An hour should get us. We'll see.
How's the running career going, man?
Man, it's been hit or miss, right? It's
same here.
When we were talking, things were just kind of, not sure how the pandemic was going to all work out, right? And I finished doing the GVRAT, the Great Virtual Race Across Tennessee, right? So I did that. So that was May, June, July, and August. And man, that ran me into the ground, literally.
Yeah.
And I put some of the most miles I've ever ran in a month in those, back to back to back months. And I was like, man, I don't know. And then what was it? I just kind of started coasting towards the end of the year because I was like, didn't really have anything to really plan for or shoot for. Races are canceled left and right. I was like, you know what? I don't really care. And I started changing training plan up a little bit, and I ended up running a 50 miler in November. It was just kind of a spur of the moment thing. It was an actual race. In Missouri, and it was an inaugural race. I was going to shoot for the 100, but I was like, no, I think I'm just going to go with the 50. And I'm glad I did. It turned out to be a very epic race.
Nice.
Literally a tornado touchdown just outside of town. And I had about 45 minutes after I finished my 50 miler, I got back to the hotel, was sitting in the tub, sirens went off. Well, there was actually people still out on the course. They ended up running a 100 miler in their gymnasium and just doing laps. And I was like,
that's a great story, man. That's a story.
Yeah, I know. Right. And so, just kind of changed things up, did that. And then, things were good. And I just kind of slowed progress. And I've been working towards, I've got an endurance event that my best friend and I are going to do in June in Wisconsin. It's mostly biking and hiking and some of that. And so, I've been changing up the training program and I got tired of running the longer distances. I'm gonna be honest. It's just, I was like, my body and my mind need a break. And I just don't really feel like, I think the pandemic, it took a lot out of me mentally because, you're just constantly, I lost my job in May and I got a new job in September. And then that job didn't turn out to be the job that I thought it was going to be. And so was under the gun, stressed, and actually changed jobs the last weekend of March. Love what I'm doing now. So it's a whole new dynamic, fresh look. And I was like, my body is just physically tired. I didn't want to get up for runs. I didn't want to run. And I was like, I can't get up for a 4 or 5 hour run. I just don't have it in me.
Yeah.
And so I've focused, I'm trying to shoot for, I don't know if I'll get it, trying to go out and get my PR for my half marathon again.
Okay, sweet.
So thing is, though, it's like, that's a whole different dynamic trying to readjust and get the speed back in. And, I've still got speed, but doing those speed workouts over and over is wearing me out.
Yes.
So it's like, it's either you do the long distance and the slow distance, or you go and do short and fast, and both of them will kick your butt.
when you are so used to doing long distance and just, hey, I'm just going to get 20-mile run. I don't really care what time it is. It could be 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever. And then you go and said, okay, I'm going to run, these 800, 1600-meter sprints or tempo runs. It's a different ball game, man. And I share your story, though. Your pain is like, May, I did the calendar club thing, got hopped up as we were bored going in the office, and I got burned out of running. And I just, same thing, man. I would, for 12, 13 years, I had no problems being motivated to go run and train for races. And then I just completely, I still run, but just 3-4 times a week. Same with you. I did a 50-miler late in the year, and just trying to get that passion back for it, man.
I start doing a lot of soul searching, right? Because it's like, I love running. Yeah. But when it starts feeling like a job, then you're in the wrong, you need a break. And I start thinking about it as like, back in high school and college, we cycled, because it's like, you had cross country in the fall. I would rotate to basketball, and then I would rotate to track, and it was exercising different muscle groups, and you weren't running all the time. Yeah. And then summertime hit, and it was a different training program, but you actually had I had time off to where I didn't run.
Yeah.
And the body, I'm like, yeah, the body's an amazing thing, but I'm like, I used to, when I ran my best, I wasn't running every single day of the week. I wasn't running 150, 200 miles a month.
Yeah. It's that mental break of just doing something new. Dude, it gets boring looking at the same route over and over.
Oh, man.
I mean, where I live, I mostly drive to where I'm going to start these runs now, but like running out of my house, I'm like, ugh, no motivation.
I mean, yeah, I don't mind running in my neighborhood, but man, it gets old. It gets old real quick. And I'll go to the park and, but also doing the YouTube channel, you want to have new content, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to see the same thing over and over. I was like, I'm sure they're tired of seeing my neighborhood and the park. And I'm like, how boring, how boring.
Give different visuals, man. Give us something else.
So I got myself a really good mountain bike, and have started integrating more biking, trying to give my knees some rest too. So that went with my buddy. He came over this last weekend. We had some rain, and man, we did 2 hours of nothing but mud biking on Sunday.
Love it.
It was awesome.
That is cool, man.
It was like a lot of the stuff that I run on, but instead we were on the bikes. Well, you can cover some of that terrain really good with the bikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. It's just, it's a different season. So, but yeah, thanks for joining me, man, being able to coordinate and get things lined back out. And man, a whole year goes by and things have shifted and changed, but I've even changed the name of the podcast, and it's like,
just keep adapting, man. We keep
people
pivoting.
Are like, why'd you change the name? Why didn't you keep the Scarecrow Runner? I was like, well, I can relate to the Scarecrow. Not everybody can relate to scarecrows. Yeah. And they don't always get the correlation with me being from Kansas and stuff. And I'm like, I was actually out for a run one night, and I was just praying. I was like, I'd really like to have a different name for my podcast and the YouTube channel that will actually be able to reach people, and they can associate better and find that association. Man, it just dropped in my spirit like that. It was like running for distance. I was like, running for distance. So I go home and I check YouTube, nothing for it. And I just gotten to the 100 subscriber mark to where I could change my name.
Okay. Yeah.
And locked it in. And I was like, we're always running for distance of some form or fashion. So I was like, and the run, in our faith with the race of, I was like, perfect, let's go.
Well, dude, just like you said too, and that's a beautiful thing with that name is just where it is a journey, man. That's what we don't get sometimes. We think we all want it like right now. Why didn't this happen in my life? Whether running, life, wife, kids, whatever. But that's a great change, man.
The intro, I messed with it and I wrote it down one day, and I was like, man, that's stuck. And so now it's like a great intro talking about enjoying the journey. Basically, I lead into it, whether it's 1 mile or 100 miles, we're always running, and it's not about where we're going. It's about enjoying the journey and where it takes us. And ultimately that's in our walk with Christ, and also in the running and whatever it is. I was like, we're always on an adventure. We've been an adventure this whole pandemic. It's been a whole different dynamics. So,
it has.
Well, man, let's jump into this thing, and we'll see how things shake out.
Okay.
I've tried to plan and brainstorm, and
Yeah,
that's just
you just let it ride, man. Roll the
that's
tape,
just
let it
not
go.
my style. I like to pull it out and see how things roll. So,
Right, I like it.
all right. Thank you guys for joining me today on Running for Distance. I have a guest with me that's returning. He was in with us in season 1. The episode aired on the 4th of July last year and was part of our Deep South series, coming from the great state of Georgia. And we've had multiple guests from Georgia. The Deep South, that's one reason why I had the Deep South series. We had several people from Georgia and Florida and a great part of the country, especially during this time of the year. The heat is on in the Atlanta area and the surrounding areas. And so want to welcome to the show once again, Jack Johnson.
Glad to be here, Anthony. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And so for those of you that have not been privileged to listen to the episode in season 1, I encourage you to go back and listen to it because it was a great episode. I had a great time talking with Jack. And yes, he does get asked if he's the musician, Jack Johnson. And yes, him and I both have made banana pancakes. And but he's not upside down right now. He is right side up, and he's live with us today. And so returning for a second episode, but it's going to be a little bit different spin. We're still going to talk a little running like we've mentioned in my episode last week, but we're also taking things a little bit deeper because Jack, I know when we talked last year, the pandemic was just starting to ramp up, and it's been an interesting year. I know we were just talking about that offline, and things have really shifted. But and as we've talked about shifting and growing, things with this podcast have shifted and growing, and the Lord has put things on my heart that I felt like I needed to do. And sometimes you just got to roll with it. Who cares what it looks like? Who cares how you plan it out? And who cares what people think about it? Because if God puts something on your heart, you roll with it because you got to be obedient. And I know in your podcast, when we talked last time and so many others, we always start to get into the heart of different things, especially with faith and our walk. And then it's like, time's up. And I was like, we were just getting to the good stuff. And it's like, man, I want to revisit that and get that conversation going again. And so just real quick, a recap with Jack. Jack is an ultra runner. He's an athlete. He has been running for a long time. But just like myself, Jack has experienced a lot of change in this last year, getting burned out of running, our bodies have taken us for a loop, right? The pandemic has definitely challenged us in a lot of different aspects. And so, just repurposing, refocusing ourselves on things that are important to us. Jack, he's still running. He's not going out running 100 milers, and neither am I, but that doesn't mean he won't run another 100 miler. And same for me. We're just different seasons. Changes are coming along, but I mean, Jack is a veteran as far as it comes to running hundreds. I know he ran the 100 miler in Chattanooga and Pinhoti 100. And then most recently a 50 miler this last year, just like I did. And so he knows what it takes to go out and run a 100 miler. He knows what it takes to endure and persevere. And we'll just kind of lead into the conversation, Jack. I know when the first episode that we talked about, I titled it something that you would always reference when we would talk is tiger's blood. And that's something that, you would use as your mantra when you're pushing through pain and dealing with adversity and self-doubt. But today we're going to talk a little bit different, and it's a different kind of blood. We're going to talk about the blood of Jesus. And, that's the ultimate blood right there. But, I know when you're running 100 milers and you're going out and persevering and enduring in these events, that's something that was really important to you is your faith and just trusting in the Lord and the power of prayer with your wife as your crew chief and things like that. How about you just share just for a minute, Jack, kind of how you came to know the Lord and kind of how the Lord has, I know you really got to, based in our last conversation, when you were becoming an entrepreneur with your recycling business and things really took a turn towards the worst with the financial aspect of things. You're searching for some answers, and that's when you found Jesus. So how about you take us a little bit into that?
Yeah, that was a big, I think, growing up and I grew up an only child. So it was always my grandmother, and my wife laughs about it to the day of my grandmother referring to me as baby Jesus, right? So I grew up as the only child, only grandchild, and everything was pretty much, I was very nurtured, right? I mean, I think, and had some success early in life. Nothing really came that hard for me. Making friends was easy, making money. Starting the businesses, when we talked about starting the business back in, I guess that was back in 2008, even coming through recession, starting up, and the business took off pretty good. Same thing. I started like just really kind of building into that ego that I had built up of everything's going good. It's always going to go good. And I'm just going to continue to elevate, and no real tragedy is going to come in my life. And then, when the business started to fail and it took over a couple year period, that's when really I started to notice that, growing up a Christian, but I have spent many years away from God. It was all about me for probably, teens, 20s, 30s, up until probably about 39, 40 years old. And that's where it came, where I said, you know what, I've got to, when it really hit the fan, it's, dropping to the knees and just saying, God, I can't do this anymore. I've tried to control and grab that steering wheel. And I've always felt like I was in control of my life. I can't do it anymore. I'm worn out. I'm tired. I've got to give all this over to you, Lord. And I'm not big enough and strong enough to handle it. And amazing, Anthony, what the transformation of my life, the transformation of relationships with, damaged, put my wife through a lot of stuff with the business and kind of still holding on to the ego and the financial stuff, so that was really took a lot of relief off of me to where I knew I could be born again and live the life God intended me to live.
Absolutely. And kind of like what you touched on, Jack, with the financial side of things, with owning your own business. I know last week when I talked with Mike, he was formerly in the ministry, and he had marital problems, and that's kind of a, it's the real talk, right? People don't always want to talk about those things, but the fact of the matter is, as men of faith, we all have issues, we all have struggles, but as a man, we oftentimes pride ourselves as, I'm the man and everything's good, and we just kind of sweep it under the rug, right? But we begin to, when we talk with other men, where iron sharpens iron, you start to peel away the layers, right? And get real and have some real talk. It's like, we look great on the outside, but on the inside, a lot of us are really a mess. And I know you talked about how you were running for a long time, not literally running, but running in the spiritual sense. And I've been the same way, man, to where, it's a struggle and we're not where we should be in our walk. And then we start to take on endeavors, like whether it's in ministry or being your owner of your own business or whatever it might be. And then we forget about the ones that are with us, which are supposed to be our helpmates. They're supposed to be the ones that help us do it with us, right? Our wives are supposed to be our right-hand woman, not right-hand man, but our right-hand woman or our best friend. And a lot of times we're trying to do things ourselves, and we're trying to make business decisions on ourselves, and we don't bounce it off of them. Or then when adversity hits, we don't always share the down and the dirty with them because we want to protect them, right? Because they're more fragile. Mm-hmm. Well, then you're not communicating with your spouse like you should, or your business partner. And, things start to get in between. And as we both know, when you start to have things that are not always communicated the way they should, when something does pop up and she realizes it, then, as they would say, all hell breaks loose. And then you've got problems in your marriage. And then that resonates into your business or your ministry or whatever you're in, when it should be the complete opposite. You guys should be together as a team and be able to handle things as a team. And, where, in the word, it talks about, a three-cord strand is not easily broken, right? Well, so many times we often leave either ourselves or our spouse, or most importantly, God, out of the equation. And we don't have that three-cord strand tied up like we should. We're trying to do it on one or two, and it doesn't work that way. And, just like the man that built his house on sand, it doesn't have a solid foundation. And so, you went through a lot of financial issues, and things were falling right out from underneath of you. When things looked great, that's when adversity hit. And I know the same thing is like, at one point, gosh, it's been it's been about 15 years ago, but at the time it was the best position I had ever had. And I was making the most money I'd ever had, but I wasn't where I needed to be spiritually. Not to say that I am right now either, but pride started to set in, right? And it's like what they say is pride comes before the fall. And here you are, financially secure, money's good, the business is great, but you also had an area where I know you mentioned over expansion, right? You got too big too fast and you grew. And as we know, when foundation spreads out, there's weaknesses, and those weaknesses start getting exposed. You start to fall out financially. That causes problems with your marriage. And then what do you do, right? And that's where you call on Jesus, and that's where things change. Is when you bring God into the picture, things start to, as they would say, add color to the situation. It's black and white with him, and God does not really care for the gray areas. We need to have the color, and as we both know, black and white are our main colors, and so you got to look at it the black and white. And when you're looking at the financials, it's either black or red, and you don't want to be in the red.
Red's a bad place.
Red's a bad place, but it's a good thing when you're reading the Bible, because those red letters, that's the important thing, right? Those are the words that are most important.
Right. No doubt, man. And that's where I think with all the shame as guys carry around. So, I was always the one that would never tell anyone anything. It was always the facade of, hey, Jack, how's it going, man? Everything's hunky-dory, great, because I'm a positive, optimistic person by nature. So just everybody expected me to do that. So anytime I would go to someone, they would be shocked if I'm like, yeah, I'm having some struggles or problems. But that's really what, I think God put so many. I look back at the people that God put in my life through that time 3-4 years ago, and the new relationships I have today were just strong Christian men and men that had been through things themselves, and that I could, lean on as a mentor. And that was huge in pulling me out of that, right? Because I started looking up to God, and with going to him with the troubles and things I was going through, and praying a lot, praying with my wife, and that was a big part of what pulled us out of that. But also needed these earthly mentors kind of feeding that word as well, helping me get through that.
Absolutely. So what kind of is there a particular group of guys? I know we've talked briefly about it, and I know I'm pretty sure I know, but I want to hear from you for sure. I'm trying to recall. Was it F3 that you were a part of?
Yeah, F3 was a big thing. So right before that, I was North Point Community Church and Andy Stanley, and there was a leadership development group that they had just to bring in group leaders in the church. And I was, very blessed to be a part of that group for about a year. And it was 6 men that just all going through about my age, and they're right at about 40, 45 young kids, and that season of life. So to be able to lean on them and have, weekly meetings, and we'd meet outside of that and just texting back and forth, sharing scripture, diving into the Bible a lot more in the Word. That's what really gave me a great foundation to know there's just so many good men out there. And then that led into F3 and the workout group, and some of those whole values of like saying, okay, cool, I've got to pick myself up, get back physically. Because, for about 2-3 years, I'd always attach my, my worth, or what I just enjoyed doing being an athlete growing up, is enjoyed working out. So I didn't do that for 2-3 years, mostly when the business was in bad shape. So getting back into that, started getting the connection again with the mind, the body, spirit. And that's when just really started, feeling great.
Absolutely. And I know F3 is a great organization. I know people like Brad Lord, he's in on it, and he just started a new chapter. And Brad, he's going to be on this program too, talking about stuff. He just had some stuff come up last week. So he was going to be in the episode before you, but now he gets to follow you. It's so important to surround yourself with great men, because, it's all about accountability, right? We don't want to go about it ourselves, because when we do, that's when we get ourselves in trouble, thinking we can do it ourselves. It's that mentality, though, of I can do this. Well, yes, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us, but he also wants us to have accountability with brothers, kind of like the band of brothers. Well, it's like there's strength in numbers. They always talk about that. And who wants to go into a battle by themselves? I definitely don't. I know Hollywood oftentimes spins movies to make it look like the hero is doing it all himself. But if you think about it, they've got a band behind them that are helping. I mean, I don't care what movie it is, whether it's Lord of the Rings or Braveheart or any of these action-packed movies that I absolutely love. I know it fills the guys up with, going into battle, right? And they're the war cry and they're running and charging, but it's like, they're not solo. They've got a group around them. Even King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, he had men around him, right? And it's like, you don't hear about just one guy. And even Jesus, the most important character in our lives, Jesus was not by himself. Jesus had some pretty gnarly dudes that we would probably look at these days. If we were to see them on the street, would probably snub our noses up at them or turn our backs on them, because they were probably some pretty, I know just from reading, I'm like, these guys were not your run-of-the-mill good guys that we would call our homeboys or our buddies, because they had issues. But that's the thing, is we can relate to those guys.
Issues are good. Yeah.
We have issues too, and we're not perfect. And I'm like, the only time that Jesus ever did anything solo was when he needed to speak to the Father and spend time growing, and he had to separate himself. And that's important too, because you got to have that alone time, and you got to have that time for prayer. But when you are going into battle, you can't do it alone. You've got to have something within you. And fortunately for the both of us and many of those that are probably listening or watching, you have Jesus in your life. So Jack, as far as your faith goes, I know you found Jesus about the time that your business is falling apart. What started happening after you started turning things over to Christ? I know there was change that happened. Was it something that you saw immediately, or was it kind of a process, where things started to click into place?
It would go back and forth, man. Honestly, is it would have, I thought that, cool, gave my life for Christ, everything's going to be great. We're all hunky dory from here. And then certainly, the setbacks, slow, things I think are going to happen quick, take a little more time. But, over the past few years, it's really been an evolution to me being proud of the man I am today. And it's because I've been involved more in serving others versus myself. And I look at the people that God put in my life early on, some of those mentors and relationships, and them coming to serve me in a time of need. And that's really what I focused the last year on, really trying to find a way to serve others.
Yeah. And, I'm glad you touched on that, bringing up that piece of, the back and forth, because so many people have this perception, and I know it happened for me too. When I first became born again, everyone has this mindset, man, when you have Jesus, everything's going to be perfect, right? It's going to be this, life is so good. And then you get people that don't have the same mindset that we would be like, well, why should I, why should I even consider Christ? Because I have the exact same things that you do. Mm-hmm. Well, here's the way I see it is, if you don't have Christ versus having Christ, and you have crisis, what are you going to do? Right. And unfortunately the world, when they try to go at it alone, it's a struggle. And Jesus never said it would be easy. I mean, he gives us things that we have to deal through, but I've learned that relying on him, that life is easier. He never said it would be easy. I always like to think about the poem, and don't mind Jack moving here, because he's got somebody working on his house. So he's got to change locations here. He's pivoting, like we would say in life. We pivot and we change directions. But and here I lost my train of thought. I always like to think about the poem Footprints in the Sand, because it talks about, I'm always with you, and the man was like, well, what happened when it goes from 2 pairs of prints to 1? What's up with that? And, Jesus is like, that's when I carried you.
Yeah.
You know, he never said life would be easy, but he will never leave us nor forsake us. And he's always there with us. He is literally our right-hand man. And, you know, it's just about trusting him and letting, that's the thing with the pride with man, letting ourselves become vulnerable, because we as men don't want to be vulnerable, because that show to so many, that's a form or a sign of weakness. But when we can be real and vulnerable with one another, that's literally when we become stronger, because then it's exposed. And I was listening to a message by Pastor Craig Rochelle this last couple of weeks. He's gone through a series on basically the series was called Deep Cleaning, and it ranged everything from finances to challenges with men with porn, to mindset, to just having a good attitude, and, you know, accountability and things like that. And it's like, when we strip away the stuff and we admit that we can't do it on ourselves, then we become stronger. But it's when we're prideful and we hold it all in, is actually when we're weaker.
Very true. Very true. I mean, I think just coming out when you do share that and you do make yourself vulnerable and say, hey, this is me. I may be going through a tough time, but you'd be surprised who comes out and loves on you. And I think that was a big thing for me, is, you know, making myself vulnerable, which I hadn't done for, 30 some odd years of my life. And of doing that, it was an eye opener. And I think that people are drawn to that because they see, okay, cool, this person has struggles just like me. And even the people, it's what I tell men all the time, or when we're talking, or maybe somebody's going through it and I'm sharing my story, is you could look and be the most put together person that you see, or in your circle, right? They have, you know, great house, money, everything looks in line, everybody smile, but that person could be going through something. So I think it's just being open. And what I've noticed is when you come out and share your story and you're, you know, just, you know, passionate about it, or you're just saying, hey, I've been through stuff as well, that gets people thinking and sharing what they've been through. And it's just, it leads to a better connection and bond, certainly, and the people that you want to have in your circle.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, in today's society, it's like with social media, you know, it's such a heavy presence, and I see it so many times, and even my own kids, the filters drive me crazy, right? And there's so many times where, especially females, like to use the filters, my daughter included, and I'm like, you are beautiful. You don't have to have a filter to show your true beauty. What you're doing is you are masking the true beauty that God has created. You're not ugly. You don't need a filter to make you look prettier. But a lot of people, it's about self-image. And so many times, you know, my wife and I talk about, it's like, I know that there's people that are on Facebook or Instagram, wherever it might be, and they post, and I'm guilty of it too. Everything looks great. Right? It's your family vacation. It's your time with your kids. It's going here and going there, and everything looks great. But I know, because I know those people, I'm like, it's not great.
Yeah.
Their house is in disarray. Their house is a mess. And of course, I'm guilty of it too. They're having issues with their spouse, their kids. They had one of their kids run away, whatever it might be. And here we are presenting ourselves to the world as things are great. Everything's great. But it's not. And it's like you were saying, when people pass by and say, hey, Jack, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for asking. No, yeah. I think we oftentimes get, and I've been guilty of it too. Hey, how are you doing? I'm doing great, doing good. It's because we don't want to become committed. There's the commitment thing, right? Because, and I'm going to tie it to this, because a lot of times nowadays schools don't want to become committed to, say, like bullying or whatever it might be, because if they get involved, then there's a responsibility that is then upon them, right? And so if I ask you how you're doing and you tell me, man, I'm not doing very well, I'm actually going through a lot right now, I'm on the verge of bankruptcy, I'm about to lose my wife, you have now shared something with me that has me associated. I'm like, wow, I can't just walk away from this. And if I do, then shame on me. But it's like, there's a responsibility there as a man of God, be like, okay, this is heavier, this is deeper. And so it's like, yeah, you ask somebody how they're doing and they say, I'm doing great. Are you really doing great? And that's where we got to be real with ourselves, because, you know, so many times we're putting that filter on. And as Christians, we oftentimes put that filter on, and we don't need to have the filter. We need to take the glasses off and look at things truly through the eyes of the Father, because he will actually put you where you need to be. That's where it hurts. It's like he will hit you because he takes the filter off and it's raw and it's pure.
Yeah. I got to admit, if there was a dad bod filter, I may put that on my phone. I need that. 44 years old, the running slowed a little bit. So, but I think when we've had men's groups here, and Kimber and I, my wife, have been in a couples group, and we'd come in hot, man, coming out of the stuff we'd been through, and we're sharing our story. And you see some people backing up in the seat a little bit, and that's not a knock on them. It's just, are you ready to share that story, right? So some people are not that comfortable. And once again, it's not saying because we're coming out there and doing it that we expect you to come in and join this conversation. Like, everybody has their own time that they want to share some of that stuff in the forum. But I think, it's more, you put it out there. It's cool to surround yourself with the people that you want in your circle and the people that you're going to grow into your life with.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been in some of those groups, with other married couples, and even with pastor and their wife. And to hear a pastor and his wife share things, I mean, that is major vulnerability there. Because normally pastors aren't going to share the deep, dark secrets.
Right.
So that it's a safe place if they're opening up, because then they're making themselves very vulnerable. But on the flip side, they know if they become vulnerable, they've got people around them that will love them and support them. They expose that vulnerability. Mm-hmm. It's no longer a stronghold, right? Because it's been exposed. So you got to get that stuff out. And it's like, man, for those that are watching or listening, if you have stuff that you are holding on to, I encourage you to get with somebody. I don't care who it is, to just share, because that's sharing is caring, as they would say, right? If you find somebody and you can share and they can share back, you build that bond and that relationship. And that's, I used to think surrounding myself with so many friends was important, but it's not about the number of friends that you have. It's about it's not quantity, it's quality. And I would rather have a circle of friends that's 3 or 4 or 5 at the most, versus having 500-600 friends or whatever. You can't really spend enough time with those people, but it's those intimate friendships and those relationships that you have to where you can truly get through some tough stuff. And so, you made it through all the challenging stuff, not to say you don't go through challenges now. But having Jesus at the wheel, helping you with the finances, you go through things. That's just part of being a business owner. You go through the ebbs and flows of stuff. And as we talked before we jumped on here with the pandemic, last time we talked, the pandemic was just starting out, and there was a lot of stuff we didn't really know at the time, Jack. There's a lot of stuff we didn't know. And that boils down to, how we knew races and sports and stuff were getting shut down left and right in schools and employers. And then it's like, you see things on the surface and you see things happening, but I was like, we're not really going to see the true effects of this, the ripple effect, right? It's like we saw stuff happening then, but we're actually just now starting to see some of the effects from last year surfacing now. And that comes down to things like, like lumber and things like that. The supply chain, those things have been disrupted. Life has been disrupted. Shipping, they can't ship things, and costs of goods are just skyrocketing. And it's like, we haven't gone through, the pandemic, things are starting to slow as far as the spread of COVID, but the spread of the effects on our lives, it's not done yet. I think it's probably going to be an effect on us for a long time to come because of the impact that it's had. You knock down people's economy for over a year across the globe, and it's going to have major implications. But I wanted to ask you, with you being a business owner and things of that nature, how this has all hit you, because, you've got faith in God now and you've got your wife at your side, but you're facing a challenge in front of you that you've never experienced before. How has your faith in God during this time been important?
It's been monumental in guiding me through it. And and just update is, so I was a casualty of the pandemic, where my business, I made a decision after 12 years to shut it down last year, just say around last May. So I'm now working for someone in sales for the first time in 12 years. But, you know, going through that, I'm at peace with that decision. I mean, it certainly helped me out versus me looking like, wow, this is a business failure. Oh my gosh. And taking that internally, I just look and saying, hey, God, this is where you're leading me. And there, I'm here for a reason. And, you know, and some of the doors that have been open, it's been pretty cool to see what's happened in the last year.
That's hard because I mean, that was what we would call your livelihood. That is, you know, you started this business from scratch. You went through growth, you went through adversity, but like you and so many thousands, maybe even millions of others, you know, I was a casualty as far as, you know, losing my job on May 1st last year. You know, losing your job is one thing, but losing a job during a pandemic is a whole different ballgame, right? Because it's like everybody seems to be out of work. Everybody is displaced. And it's like, it becomes a survival of the fittest, you know, whether it's spiritually, especially spiritually. And I know my experience as an ultra runner and mental toughness, and as you would call tiger blood, allowed me to, you know, those types of things, of pushing through and knowing that I can get through this because I have conquered 100-mile races that have pushed me to the brink, right? That preparation and that training helped me in so many different ways, knowing, and the fact that it wasn't my first time of ever being laid off, I was like, this too shall pass. But it's like, this is a whole different dynamic because it's like, man, everybody that I know is affected. And for you as a business owner to make the decision of shutting it down, you know, that's huge. But then also knowing that God is going to provide, because he always does, to have the faith to shut it down, but also have the faith to know I'm going to be all right. It's going to be all right. And so many people have had to play that card, Jack, say, you know what? It's time to make a change. It's time to pivot and shift and see what happens. And I heard something a couple months ago. They said back in the, I want to say, I think it was the 1600s or whenever it was, back when the Black Death and the plague, the bubonic plague, was sweeping across Europe. Shakespeare, it was either the 1400s or 1600s. I don't remember. Dates are, I'm a history buff, but the dates are not there for me today. But they said that Shakespeare ended up writing some of his best works when they were completely shut down. You know, we cry because the movie theaters and everything were shutting down, and, you know, businesses are shutting down. Well, they shut the theaters down too. And, you know, as a playwright, Shakespeare needed actors to be able to perform the plays, right? Well, they're shut down. He writes some of his best works when everything's shut down. He made the best of his opportunity. And much like you, you're used to doing something every day. Well, you change and you shift and you pivot and you move into a different direction. It's a new season. And the same has gone for so many as far as churches go, because, you know, people are displaced. They're like, what do we do about church? And stuff like what we're doing right now with Zoom and other forms of communication. It used to be, you would never hear about a company even considering having employees working from home and working through a screen like this. And now this is the norm. This is the new norm. It's like, I was doing it before, but now it's like, this is part of my everyday life. You become accustomed to it and you adapt to your surroundings. And I know as ultra runners, we both know you have to learn to adapt, because you never know what's around that corner, right? You might be at mile 75 or mile 80 and the wheels fall off. What are you going to do? And I know you've had to dig deep before. And so here you are faced with a decision about your business. You're having to dig deep once again, but in a different aspect. So tell me, Jack, I know you made the decision to shut it down. What did you decide to do, and how have you gone about moving into the next chapter?
Yeah, you know, I think I just praise the Lord that the mental side of that whole transition was in the right place, because I'm a big believer that God wants the best for each and every one of us, and the best is yet to come, right? So what we're living in right now, the moment, and then what God wants and what he's opening up for our future, even if it looks dire and you look down and out, and we've been down and out so many times, right, in business or through some of these races. So, you know, there can be pain in the moment, and there can be self-doubt because we're human, and thinking like, man, I built this business up and all these different things, and now here I am, I've battled through, because the business has started to get better the last couple of years. And, you know, so I'm thinking, okay, cool, here we go. And then have to shut it down. it's just like there was a peace over that decision, and I knew that I needed it. It wasn't for me also, right? Because we talked last podcast, that kind of that Rocky mentality of, hey, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going. And then I had a great mentor that looked, a guy named Dennis Brown, but he came and said, Jack, look, take a second, take a breath, and look at the people that are on that roller coaster with you, right? You've got your wife right there beside you. You've got your kids in the back, the next cabin behind you. Look what you're kind of putting them in, and you don't think it's a lot because you have that entrepreneur mentality and that, hey, I'm going to keep fighting and we'll get through this. But they necessarily don't. So do you want them to be on that ride with you? So take a hard look at what other opportunities are out there for you. And that made it easy to make that decision to punt it and move on with life.
Absolutely. It's not about like we were saying just a little bit ago, it's no longer just about you. You got to take into account your whole family, your wife, your kids. And, so many times, the kids, we don't always think about the kids. I mean, yes, I think about my kids, don't get me wrong, but I don't always think, how are they handling this? Right. And I know when I've talked to some of my kids, and I know discussions with them, with other kids at school, these kids are having to go through stuff that we've never even, I can't imagine going through it when I was their age. Right. Because they've had so much ripped away from them in the last 14 to 16 months that it's like, yeah, we're disappointed that we can't go to the ball game, or we're disappointed that we can't do this. I'm like, here's the thing. Our kids are being forced to grow up before they need to be grown up. And for you to, yes, we know that you could go through this and push through it with, and fight like Rocky. Do we need to place that on the kids? Do the kids need to worry about, what are we going to do next? How are we going to do this? No.
They're taking it all in, for sure.
And they watch and they listen. Mm-hmm. And it's most of the time, it's just from a distance and you don't realize how much of an impact. But then when it comes back down to it, where the kids are actually having discussion, and you ask them a question and they pop something up out of the blue, and it's like, oh, this is actually affecting them more than you realize. Yeah. Or how they perceive it comes across more in depth and way more involved than you would have anticipated. Then it's like, okay, it's a reality check that my family's being impacted more than I realized, and we've definitely got to take a look at this and pivot and shift. So,
Anthony, it's taking them along with that journey, right? So having those conversations about business and, hey, yeah, this is what Dad went through, and and it was funny. I was in an argument. Wife and I were arguing the other day about some landscape work that we're doing, right? And it's right there in front of the kids, and it's not crazy. We're not throwing anything, but we're in it. We're in a heated discussion. So it's taking them on that, and then looking the next morning or even that night when Kim and I are apologizing to each other or leaving notes for each other, letting them see that too, right? So let them know that conflict is okay, but here's how we resolve it as a couple. Mom and Dad aren't going anywhere. We're here for you, but this is something that, we're bringing you along on this journey with us. So I think that's been important for the kids to see. I mean, there's certainly obviously some things, when you're in the heat of the moment or with business or anything going on, that yes, we're going to go behind doors and talk about that. But, there are certain things where it's out there and then they see you the next day and they're like, all right, cool. Mom and Dad we're good to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that, I used to not want to discuss in front of little ears, but I was like, they're having to be brought up to speed and to grow at a rate that I would have never even imagined, and having to grow up. And I'm like, you know what? Sometimes it's good to not unload the entire gamut on them, but they need to understand the impact and how things have affected. And it's like, so I try to be as open as possible, during the time of, hey, fortunately we were blessed when I got laid off that, I had a nice severance package where we've got money in the bank, so we don't need to worry about money. But we also have to be mindful of the situation that we're in, because we don't want to just be careless with what God has blessed us with. I can honestly say, and I'm thankful, I still have a good portion of that money that I got a year ago.
That's great.
Because I was frugal enough to stick it away.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we use it. Our plan is to pay off debt with it, but I didn't want to just completely just go out and blow it all and knock debt out.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine, but I don't want to completely put myself in a position where I'm sucking for air either. Yes, I have a job. But I want them to see that, it's good to establish boundaries for the kids and help them to understand, money does not grow on trees. We know that it's a financial lesson. And then sometimes that money does not come. And you don't want to necessarily have to be dependent on the government and things like that. And so, they talk about, they're being educated, Jack, with things like stimulus checks and all these different things. I'm like, man, when we were growing up, you didn't talk about that stuff. You didn't even know anything about that. And here we are, they're like, hey, are we going to get another stimulus check? And I was like, whoa, hold on a second. I was like, so it's an opportunity to share with them, yes, those things can be good, but you have to look at the big picture, because when you start getting money handed to you or things handed to you, you got to look at the whole thing, because what's going to come, what you got to see what both hands are doing, because you see money in this hand. Well, what's this hand doing? Right. And it's like, there's always a silver lining, and there's always details behind, as I like to say, behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz, right? Dorothy's talking to the wizard, and they thought that it was great and powerful Oz, and you take the curtain back, and it's just this little scrawny man behind talking through a microphone and making himself look bigger and badder. But there's always something that's out there that, they're dangling a carrot, and I'm like, what are they really, So I use it as opportunity to educate them on business, right? Because they're going to be the future with the business leaders and stuff. And I'm like, they got to know that you may be affected in the future with your taxes and your income and whatever it might be. And you got to be prepared. And here we are preparing, my 11-year-old, my 6-year-old, my 14-year-old on things that they probably shouldn't have even had to worry about for many years, but having to do it now.
That's good. That's going to be, that'll benefit them.
And but then also to spin it to where you show them where God is providing. And I think that's a very important thing, is they see God's providence and his hand on us and how he blesses. And it's important because, they go to school and they're around so many different people, and these kids, you start to hear the conversations with kids when they come home. Well, so-and-so said this and so-and-so said this. I'm like, those kids are talking the way they hear their parents talk at home.
Yeah.
And it's the influence. And I'm like, what kind of influence are we being to our children and to our wives? And it's like, it boils down to, well, it's the heart of the Father. Are we doing what Jesus would want us to do as a man, as a husband? Because how we talk will reflect bigger than we ever imagined, because they're going to go back to school and they're going to talk a certain way. And then their friends are going to talk about stuff, and then their parents are going to be like, oh, well, that's what they're doing, right? So implications, it's huge. It ripples everywhere, and we got to watch what we say. And because actions speak louder than words, the kids are always listening, even though they may not be in the room. They're going to hear you, or they're going to see you.
Great ears.
It's tough. And things like the pandemic and dealing with financial stuff like what you've dealt with, it puts you in some stressful situations, because it's not always easy. Just because you're following what God's telling you to do and that you've got peace about it, but that does not mean it's going to be rainbows and unicorns, right? It's going to there's going to be rough spots, and you got to be prepared for that. Put your seatbelt on. We're going to go for a ride. But they also got to know the importance of letting God be in control, and where we take a step back and we allow him to, he's the author and perfecter of everything. We're along for the ride. He's in charge. We'll entrust him with everything.
Yeah. No, it's good. I think, knowing that that's where there's not much fear for the future. I think for me, that's what I try to pass along to the kids, is just that, our future is in God's hands. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, hey, I'm going to sit down on the chair and wait for something to happen or show up in my life. I believe God still wants us to go out there and put things into motion, things that he's putting in front of us, and relationships and conversations and opportunities. So we just, it's the same thing with running, man. You just keep plowing forward. And when those setbacks come, I've tried to not let that derail even the day or even the hour, right? We all have those little small defeats, a lost sale, something going on, a bad conversation with a buddy. So whatever comes up that may hold you back, recognizing that and getting back in the game and keep moving, man.
Absolutely. So Jack, what's one thing as a father, as a husband, that you try to instill with the kids as far as representing Christ? I mean, you're the Godhead for your family. You're the main focal point. You are kind of like God's general in your family. You are the responsible party for your family and their well-being. What do you do as far as the best way of displaying Christ to them?
It's for me, man, it's love on people. It's just simple as that. Is love doesn't matter where you're from. We've been blessed to have the opportunity the last 6 months in a little running club that we started up to start running with some guys that were in a drug and alcohol program, and we'd held races and build those guys up and train them. Then in the last 3 months, we've been training a group out of Georgia Works, but it's homeless men. They're in a rehab program to get their life in order and become a contributing member to society. So, man, the stories that we've heard of these guys that have given the world as we know it pretty much gave up on them, right? And they gave up on themselves. And to see them, we trained them run a 5K, 10K, which they just did a couple of weeks ago. So just to see that the power of God within these men, that restoration is possible. And then when they start believing themselves through running and what they build up towards, where they can go in their life. So we just try to, I think the biggest thing is showing up. So showing that to the kids, having them around that and having conversations that people can have hard times. And sometimes they're not bad people. They just have bad circumstances around that led them where they are. But that doesn't mean that even though we're in a big house and have cars and things around us, that we don't love on other people less fortunate. So I just think that we're all God's people, and that's a message I want to keep portraying to the kids is, just spread the love that God gave us.
Absolutely. That's that is solid, because man, that's awesome about the running club with the homeless people. That's so cool, because yeah, you're right. So many people write them off, right? And yeah, just like in life itself, there are people that look just like you and I that are complete. It only takes one person to ruin the image of, perception of everybody. And most people have this stigma of, well, they're a homeless person. They're a bad person. Not the case. They've just, a lot of, now granted, there are some that have chosen that, and they've decided to do that, much like us, where might be a white collar or blue collar person. You had a great job and you blew it on drugs and alcohol, and you made that choice, and you have to lay in that bed. But there are people that are just like you and I that became homeless, and whatever reason it is, they found themselves on the street and they are in a hard spot. And there are ones that want to make a difference, and they want to take a chance and change, but because of the perception, they oftentimes don't get that chance, right? People look at them and they just kind of, they don't want to allow them to be back into society. And so that is huge, because I mean, just like you said, love on people. And that's what Christ calls us to do, is to love, right? We are to be love. We are to be as Christ, and Christ is love. God is love. Well, why not share love with people? And what better way to do it than through the love of running? I mean, that's something that you have been passionate about for a long time. And I know that you haven't necessarily have loved it as much recently, just like I, because, you tend to get worn out and burned down.
Yeah. Potato chips are good. Start eating a lot of chips. Cheese dip.
Absolutely. Your eating habits change a little bit, and you gain a little weight. And, but the thing is you still have a passion for running and something that you love, and to be able to share that with other people, well, why not? And so then you've got running and common ground with somebody. And I know just through running, you go out running with somebody, you end up learning a lot about that person. They learn a lot about you because you have those conversations, and you build that common ground and that trust. Yeah. And man, you can make a world of difference just by opening that up. And man, that's huge. That's awesome stuff.
It's been rewarding, man. One of the guys down there told us, or the chairman the other day, we had lunch with him and said, hey, appreciate you guys so much for coming down here. We're like, no, we appreciate you guys, because blessed to be able to have this opportunity to be a part of that group. And just some of those, well, some of the runs, I mean, just that positive relationship as they start getting the runs in, they, gets consistent and holding them accountable to that. They start having that positive relationship with their body and with their mind, elevating their mind, what they believe they're capable of doing, and where that goes. And, there's some frustrations with it too. So we've seen guys that started running with us and then they bailed out and got back on the streets, started doing drugs, alcohol, whatever. And, then we've seen some of them come back, and that's the good thing, is they start seeing, well, man, I don't want that life out there in the streets. I want something a little bit more. So, it's been great.
That's awesome. And I can't remember the story that I heard at one point, but I want to say there was an ultra runner that I'd read about that actually had been a drug addict and was homeless and was living on the streets. And then, something similar to yours, found that he started to transform, like you said, it begins to shape them, right? Because you start to have structure, you start to have discipline, and they start to feel good about themselves. And it becomes an addictive thing, which is in a good way for many of them. It's a good addiction. And transform this guy to where he became, pretty prominent as far as a runner goes. So good stuff. I mean, you're teaching fundamentals and you're teaching basics in life. I mean, running, as we both know, you can associate with life itself, because you got to be prepared. You got to train. We are in a run in our life to go for the prize that has been set before us. And that's kind of the whole context of my whole spin on the podcast and the YouTube channel now, Running for Distance, is we are running a race of life. And whether it's taking us down the street or the trails or wherever it might lead us, it's about the journey and the people along the way. And so you're doing that right there. And that's awesome. Man, that makes me feel good just hearing that. And
it's great to be a part of, just to see those smiles, showing up. It's great, Anthony. I mean, we couldn't be more excited to have that opportunity with them. And that's where it's like, we want more. So now we're saying, okay, cool. Maybe we do a nonprofit and we kick around and hit some other locations and go on. But it's all in that, you start having that business mentality, that growth, but then now it's all like, how many can we impact and grow? Because I think we look at it and say, you and I don't know what one of these people, if they come out and have a positive impact, maybe someone down the road that they lead out of, poverty or something they're going through. So I think we're all connected in that way as guys, children, and we're not above anyone. It's just, and we don't know who's going to show up at the right time.
Absolutely. It's pretty cool that you mentioned that, because I actually watched a movie with my wife last week. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Same Kind of Different of Me. And it's based on a true story in Dallas. And his wife had a dream about a homeless man. And she saw a potential in this man. And the man had a lot of demons that he was dealing with. But, most people didn't give him a chance. And, basically through the course of the story was them trying to get in touch with this man and spend time with him and befriend him. And it turned out to be a beautiful thing. Turns out that, he loved the Lord, and he was actually becoming, somebody important. And, towards the end of the story, and of course, I know she ends up passing away from cancer, but him and the husband end up writing this book as a bestseller, right? And become motivational speakers across the country. But here it was, this homeless man that was seemed very violent and somebody you would not want to spend time with. But because they started spending time and investing in him, that started bringing the good out in him, and it changed him for the rest of his life. So those are awesome things. And man, that's a feel-good story right there. I think that's where I'm going to end things right there, Jack, because I know the afternoon will get away from us with our schedules, and we could talk all day long. I know I could. But man, that's good stuff. I'm glad you shared that. And man, that is definitely being Jesus. And just put some running shoes on somebody, and life will be a lot better. But ladies and gentlemen, Jack Johnson from Georgia. I'm glad you were able to join me today, Jack. It was great to catch up once again. Hopefully we won't spend a year apart again. This last year has, as we both said, has flown by. As crazy as it seems that a year has gone by already. Here we are a year older. and more seasoned and are going through different changes and stuff. And I'm excited to see where things progress with this. And I'm definitely going to keep in touch with you and see how things go. But man, I just pray blessings on you and your wife and your family and this opportunity, and that the Lord would just use it in a mighty way. And man, great things are in store, brother.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. It's been a pleasure being on, man. Talking to you again, reconnecting.
Absolutely. And we will talk to you soon, my man.
Sir.
All right. Take care, Jack. We'll talk to you later.
See you then.